for a government agency. Always looking for good, enthusiastic men to help us carry out our directives.
You're telling me that there is a movie company in Hollywood right now that is funded by the CIA?
I think probably Hollywood is full of CIA agents, and we just don't know it.
I mean, can you ever really trust another human being? No, the answer is you cannot.
Either very smart or incredibly stupid.
Test. Everything's a test, remember? Nothing is what it seems.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the CIA in Hollywood. I'm Tom Secker, and this is episode 13, Race to Witch Mountain.
"150 miles outside of Las Vegas,
object of unknown origin descending fast.
There is a place where unexplained phenomena occur.
Awesome.
It is known as Witch Mountain.
Where to?
We must travel in that direction.
Latitude 40.5.
We're just gonna stick with that direction.
Those vehicles behind us are indicating a pattern of pursuit.
I'm just gonna let them pass. Are you doing this? There's no way.
Seth, no. My brother and I are not from your planet.
Well, you don't look like aliens.
What does an alien look like?
You know what aliens look like? They're like little green people with antennas that take me to your leader, Earthlings. Ooh.
You're telling me you think those two kids were extraterrestrials searching for their missing spaceship?
Oh, they can also do all this stuff, too.
Our spaceship is locked inside Witch Mountain.
If we don't get there in time,
The invasion will begin.
Who is he?
He's a bounty hunter.
It's neat. Real neat. Don't worry, I'll get you to where you need to go.
We appreciate your understanding.
She talks to dogs. Of course she does.
You are in way over your head.
We got him.
We have to hurry.
Run!
Whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
I get claustrophobic in tight places.
How are you with heights?
Hang
on! You do know how to fly this thing, right?
How do you think we got here?
Well, you crashed, remember?
Today we are joined by James Evan Pilato, and I think both Tom and I, our listeners, should know who James Evan Pilato is. And if you don't know, James is, of course, the man behind MediaMonarchy.com, which is his main website, where you can find all of the different work he does. James is probably most well known for New World Next Week with James Corbett, but James also does just a ton of other stuff. Pump Up the Volume. He does Morning Monarchy. He does Good News Next Week.
That's it.
A whole bunch of different stuff, and all of it you can find on MediaMonarchy.com. James has also worked in commercial radio, in college radio. He's done a ton of different stuff. But anyway, James Evan Pilato, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Excellent. Well, today we are going to be talking about a film that I think is going to be quite a bit of a change, not only from the stuff that we've been covering this season, but just in general. And that is the Disney film Race to Witch Mountain. And this is, I should have it out right in front of me. Of course, I don't right now. The year of the film. Tom, what was that? 2006, I want to say? 2009. Okay, there we go. It is a 2009 movie. It is sort of a remake or a reboot of Escape from Witch Mountain, which is a Disney series. And this movie deals with UFOs and ufology and UFO culture. So again, a sort of a bit of a change of pace for us. So for anyone that hasn't seen the movie, of course, we would encourage you to go and watch the movie now and then pick up the podcast from this point. But in case you haven't, basically an alien spacecraft crashes outside of Las Vegas, where, of course, there's a UFO convention taking place. Men from the Pentagon turn up, or some nefarious government agency. They impound the vehicle and they begin to search for the pilots of the spacecraft. Now, Jack Bruno, who is played by none other than The Rock, or Dwayne Johnson. He's a cab driver in Las Vegas who accidentally picks up these two young teenagers who, we find out, are actually the aliens that were piloting the craft. They explain that their planet is suffering from environmental problems due to pollution, and that their civilization is planning to invade Earth and make it their new home, unless they can sort of save the day. And they've, of course, come to Earth to retrieve the results of a scientific experiment that could, in fact, save their planet and prevent the military faction on their home world from invading. Now, the aliens are pursued not just by the government, but also by an extraterrestrial assassin. And they enlist the help of a ufologist and failed space scientist to track down their ship. Of course, her and The Rock kind of fall in love. And they find out that the ship itself, through the help of none other than Gary Marshall, is being housed at Witch Mountain in California, which is this secret, clandestine military deep state base. They break in, they successfully rescue the ship, they escape, saving both Earth and their own world, and the film ends with Jack Bruno and the scientists revealing to the world the existence of alien life. So that is the sort of the main bits and pieces of it. But quickly, James, what was your impression on the film? Because it is definitely it's a different film in that it's a kids movie that is dealing with UFOs, and I'm sure people wouldn't initially think of this as a CIA film. But James, what were your sort of initial impressions?
I had no recollection of this film coming out. Now, of course, I named it Media Monarchy for the very reason that I'm always have been huge into media. So even if I haven't seen it, I may have, I know the film's names that are coming out. This didn't register to me at all. And I was surprised initially, and I guess some of this happens as you start to grow up, a little bit how intense the film was, and to realize, oh wait, this is a kid's movie, but this is pretty, hefty, intense music, and the whole intro actually even has Reagan doing his famous UN speech about, wouldn't it be great if we found aliens? It's got Clinton in there talking about, or maybe it's the tabloid cover. But I had, as I watched through the film, there are definitely moments where it's like, okay, I'm watching a dumb kids movie, and kind of takes me out of it. But other parts, I see how smart it is, and I see all the little things that they put in there, which we can talk about, whether that's at the very beginning. I think the way we find out that we're in Las Vegas is there's a kind of a sweeping helicopter shot, which of course includes the Pyramid Casino.
Right.
There's a nice big pyramid right there at the beginning.
Yeah, no, it is a bizarre movie. It is, I think, we'll get into some of these very serious, sort of dark aspects that you wouldn't initially associate with a kids movie. But briefly, we thought, because this is a Disney movie, that we should talk a little bit about Disney. And Disney, of course, and I don't think this is going to be news to anybody, but is one of the most important film studios of all time. In terms of the impact that they've had, I can only assume that the three of us have all been impacted at some point by a Disney movie, whether it was positive or negative. But they are extremely important, not only in terms of their sort of global reach, but they're invested in all sorts of other things. Most recently, of course, Vice Media is now owned, I believe, 10 to 15% is owned by Disney. So, just something to keep in mind. But they also have pretty deep ties to the government. Of course, I think most people are somewhat familiar with the fact that Walt Disney himself, of course, worked very heavily in World War II propaganda. There's lots of famous cartoons of like Bugs Bunny, slaughtering very racist caricatures of Japanese soldiers and Nazis and things like that. And all of that is sort of obvious. Most people at that time were doing some sort of propaganda in Hollywood, but Disney was quite close, with a variety of sort of interesting characters in and around World War II, and also within the sort of larger sort of spying apparatus. But a really interesting thing that I'm not sure how many people are aware of, is the fact that the CIA actually helped Disney purchase Disneyland down in Florida. This was with the help of none other than Wild Bill Donovan and his law firm. And this is a law firm that eventually Bill Casey would go to work for. But they used Wild Bill Donovan's law firm and a CIA operative called Paul Hellawell, who worked for the law firm, but is also anyone that's looked into CIA in Vietnam and other places will know the name Paul Hellawell. But basically, they asked Hellawell, well, how can we get this land? And Disney was able to basically employed a tactic that is very familiar to a CIA tactic, in that they created phantom cities and phantom governments. So Disneyland is situated on in and around the cities of City of Bay Lake and City of Lake Buena Vista. These are both completely made up cities that Disney sort of created. Then they populated the city with Disney loyalists, and so that they were able to basically make sure that the land was then sold directly to Disney incredibly cheap. And through these city councils that they basically created, they're also able to skirt a whole bunch of environmental laws. All of the tax money ends up staying in the hands of Disney. And just as to kind of illustrate this, according to the 2010 U.S. Census, the city of Bay Lake has a population of 47, and the city of Lake Buena Vista only has a population of 10. Now, another really bizarre thing, to run for political office in either one of these cities, to basically be handpicked by Disney, you must be the owner, either directly or as a trustee of real property situated in the city, to be eligible to hold the office of councilman. So, we haven't really done something like that since, I don't know. I mean, I want to say that almost sort of harkens back to the days of slavery, and things like that. If you wanted, or it's like a Roman sort of, you must own property to be a part of the government.
But it reminds me of, it sounds like Scientology. I mean, they essentially own
same thing.
Clearwater, Florida.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's actually, I mean, the parallel is exactly. Clearwater is the exact same thing. Everybody that lives in Clearwater is a Scientologist. The city government is run by Scientologists. It's the same thing with Disney. And any decision that's made is made by Disney loyalists. And basically benefits Disney. And all of this was with the help of the CIA. That's not the only sort of bizarre connection that Disney has. This is sort of broadening it out a bit, but into the culture of UFOs. We have a very famous Disney animator called Ward Kimball, who he's claimed multiple times, still to this day, that the U.S. Air Force approached Disney and approached him specifically to create a UFO documentary. And they promised that they would get real UFO footage, that they would, help them in all sorts of things. And they took this very seriously. And Ward Kimball was working on all sorts of different things for this documentary. Eventually, nothing would come because there was no footage. But it's one of many sort of odd moments where government agencies approach be it Disney or other major, CBS being another one, promising all sorts of real UFO footage and whatnot. And just as another thing, but Walt Disney was a very good friend of C.D. Jackson, Charles Douglas Jackson, who was in charge of psychological warfare in World War II, and he was also an advisor to Eisenhower. Then, of course, there is also Alien Encounters, which is this bizarre Disney documentary that was from Tomorrowland that was ostensibly a PR campaign for a ride at Disneyland. But they used director Andrew Thomas, who was a producer for Cops, the TV show, and he was also the head of special marketing for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So he was basically a reality show producer, but also worked on a UFO movie. Disney hired him to create a fake documentary called Alien Encounters from Tomorrowland that essentially was a mockumentary dealing with the idea that we all knew that UFOs existed. Now, the film aired in only a handful of cities at random times during the day. And again, Thomas approached this as if everyone believed in UFOs and that it was a real thing. And even more bizarre is that Michael Eisner, who was at that point the head of Disney, he personally oversaw and vetted the entire content of the film, and he even had his own special crew come in to film his intro. And along with Alien Encounters, Disney also hosted a 2-week UFO conference that had all of the sort of leading heads of ufology were invited, yet there was no promotion at all from Disney, and almost no one ever showed up. So that's just a sort of brief overview, and if any of this is interesting to the listeners out there, all of this information, of course, comes from Silver Screen Saucers by Robbie Graham, and that's something that me and Tom have been talking about for a while, this excellent book, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more. But Tom, I know you had a few things you wanted to say about Disney as well.
Well, sure, just on the government connections, you have this guy, Robert Carey Broughton, who was a big Disney special effects guy who worked for the OSS in World War II. And actually, there's an article about him on the CIA's own website called A Look Back, Robert Carey Broughton from Walt Disney to War Movies. So you have that going back that sort of deep and that far. Walt Disney himself was very close to J. Edgar Hoover. He was an FBI informant for 26 years. He wasn't just an informant. He got promoted in the mid-50s to a contact for a special agent in charge, which basically means Disney could take information from other informants. He could take informant reports and then hand them over. So he was kind of running his own spy network, if you like. All sorts of weird things about Disney. They were the first film company ever to film at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory for Tron, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. More recent stuff, though, because we are talking, this is all historical, but I know you mentioned a couple of things there, Pierce, but just to kind of nail it down, The Recruit was produced by Disney, and The Recruit is possibly the most Chase Brandon-influenced film of all time. So that's 2003. And in 2011, a former CIA officer, Lindsay Moran, was hired as a consultant to Disney for the development and launch of Cars 2, the video game. So these relationships are ongoing, it seems. This is not something that sort of faded away when Walt Disney died. This is something that's very much part of the Disney fabric, I would say, through to this day. But, James, what do you make of Disney?
The last note I have, just as I went through and kind of made bullet points as I was watching the film of just things that struck me. The last note I apparently wrote says, Disney orphans! As that seems to be always kind of a recurring theme in the Disney films. There's always sort of the death of parents, and a lot of their films begin that way, with the death of parents as some kind of as a bit of trauma. I think it's important also to note that they now own Star Wars and Marvel. Mm-hmm. That they have, and they always, as you're talking, they've been around for so long. They had always sort of held the market on fantasy. But as the years and the decades went by, they kind of lost it. And in 2 moves, they own sort of the popular world of fantasy. And every other week, there's a Star Wars movie or some Marvel superhero movie coming out. Even to, in some ways, where when a DC Comics movie comes out over the weekend, everybody goes, yeah.
Right.
Nobody likes the new Batman Superman movie.
It was kind of inevitable that they wouldn't, wasn't it? It kind of felt like that. Or I don't know, I mean, disagree with me if you want, but I always felt like that when I saw that movie coming, I thought, this isn't going to be Marvel. It's not going to have Iron Man in and Scarlett Johansson in, so people are not going to like it, and that's going to be the end of the conversation, really.
Well, now, and this may take us too far afield, but I've speculated that I think part of Disney owning Marvel, and actually, I talked about this with James Corbett on his film Literature and New World Order. I came on because I wanted to talk about this Daredevil.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah,
so it was a sort of Dick Cheney wet dream of yeah. And I realized in watching that, I was like, oh, Disney has been in charge of the darkening of Marvel. Because if you grew up reading comic books, you knew Marvel they were the good guys. Spider-Man's a good dude. But DC was the dark anti-heroes that would kill. It seems like one of Disney's missions has been to kind of darken the Marvel world. The other mission is to turn it into an unstoppable cash cow. Marvel, of course, was out of money. They had exchanged hands, I think, a couple of times before Disney came in. But the other part is, how often the stormtroopers from Star Wars show up in this film, Race to Witch Mountain.
Mm-hmm. all before Disney bought Star Wars, so some prescient things going on there. And of course, too, I mean, I think we can't skip, but Disney, of course, is the premier sexualizing company out there. Sexualizing children constantly, and that's like in all of their animated films. But also in other things like the Jonas Brothers and, Miley Cyrus and Britney Spears and all of these, mostly young girls who start at Disney and then they become child prostitutes for, tabloid newspapers and whatnot. But let's move on to the movie itself, because just along what you were talking about, James, it's got the sort of cartoonish, silly aspects that we're pretty familiar with in Disney movies, but also some really kind of the darkening, the sort of heavy subject matter that you wouldn't associate with a kids movie, let alone a kids movie about UFOs. So, I mean, there's direct references in the movie to the deep state. There's this really bizarre illegal immigration analogy going on. And one of the main characters, Henry Burke, who is the sort of quintessential man in black, who answers to someone you never see. His boss is just referred to as Washington. They just say, "Oh, Washington wants to talk to you." And he, I guess, sort of works for the military. He directly says that he can use the Patriot Act at one point to detain literal aliens.
Okay. So actually, I'm glad you said that, because the line for me was garbled, and I wasn't sure what he actually said, and I wondered if they had invented some new sort of act name to use in the film.
No, he says the Patriot Act. Yeah, he says that the Patriot Act allows him to detain illegal aliens. So, I mean, I guess they're really using that, in the most literal sense in this movie. But yeah, no, he directly says that he can do that. He introduces the concept that I think is very familiar to the conspiracy culture, but basically he wants them to blow the whistle. When he gets the rock and the scientists and they catch them, they say, we're not going to kill you. It would take up too much time, all the paperwork, but we want you to blow the whistle because no one will ever believe you. And I guess because it will also inflate our own, omnipotence. But I don't know, James, we'll get into the movie itself, the sort of, again, and the blend between cartoony but also really serious. And what did that leave you with?
Well, I can just look at my notes and see, secure the perimeter. Martial law is normal. So when this crash happens in the film around the area, of course, you get a little bit of like local news lying, I think, about what happened.
Right.
Some newspapers and maybe some things flash up. They actually use a fluorine spill as the cover up for this crash so that they can keep everybody away. So they say it was a fluorine spill, so it's hazardous and no one can come near you. But it's got sort of that, lockdown overlay. I did like how they kept, it is a product placement wonderland. They mention Planet Hollywood explicitly, repeatedly, and the nationwide insurance ad slogan stays on the top of Rock's cab far longer than.
Oh yeah, things were blowing up around him
through this amazing car chase through the desert. But the slogan says "Life comes at you fast." And I noticed that there's in that first kind of chase when they are in the desert. There's like chemtrails in the sky. They do a nice big wide shot and you can see some kind of big chemtrails. So it's got the kids and it's got, kind of funny lines. And The Rock, of course, he's done sort of kid type movies before. He's a perfect action star. He's an actor. He's a wrestler. He's perfect for this kind of stuff. So it has those fun kind of elements because he's kind of a likable, not scary guy. He's someone you want him on your side. He's a big dude. But then at the same time, when they're trying to track down the kids, they go to what looks like something out of Enemy of the State or Eagle Eye, where they're doing basically real-time data analysis and tracking, and a records show them at a rest stop, X minutes ago. Bank records indicate they took out this amount. So they kind of normalize and show you all this stuff of, just constant track and trace. So that is that sort of back and forth between it being a kid's movie and then me watching it, as an adult going, oh, this deals with lots of heavy things. And isn't that in some ways how they sort of sell lots of kids' movies? Oh, your kids will love it, but you'll find things in it fun for you too, as you have to take your kid to some movie you don't want to go see.
Well, and I also wonder how much of it is a matter of just sort of acclimating children to the concepts of a deep state, that it's not really the president that's in charge, because obviously, Burke he doesn't answer to the president really. Or I mean, again, the concept of, no, we're not going to kill you. We want you to tell the public because no one will believe you, and that will make our jobs that much easier. That's a pretty heavy topic. You're not going to be like, oh, hey, take your kids to some movie about that. I mean, that's a pretty wild idea to kind of implant. And then again, it makes you think, little kids watching this movie, and then 10, 15 years from now, something happens. Are they going to have a particular response based on that? Are they going to see some, I don't know, and this is total kind of out there, but what if they see an Edward Snowden type character, or, some shill whistleblower or something, and are they going to think, oh, no, it's not real? Or are they going to see a real whistleblower and think, oh, no, it's all a joke? And they're not even aware that they're thinking that because they saw it in a movie 15 years ago when they were a little kid. I don't know, Tom, what was, what was your take on this movie and some of the deeper, kind of scarier topics?
Well, I should say I absolutely adore this movie. From the first time I saw it, I mean, I know, I get it. There's some evil stuff going on in this movie. I'm not disputing that for a moment. But of all the films that we're doing for this season, this is probably the one that I actually just enjoyed the most as a movie. I really like The Rock. I think The Rock is hilarious. I think he's one of the foremost entertainers of his generation, to be honest. For a guy,
I would second that.
For a guy that can't really act, he's actually really good. It's surprisingly so. I will point out Burke, same surname as Walter Burke from The Recruit. But yeah, more tangibly, you are absolutely right, James, when you point out there is a big flavour of Enemy of the State in this film. Clearly, the makers of this movie watched Enemy of the State because there is so much that is lifted from that film. And that, not just we've done that film before and it is a very much CIA-assisted movie, but think, when that film came out, it caused a massive stir. Just as, the internet age is arriving, we get this very, very high-tech, very attractive, well-produced, well-made film that portrays this virtually omniscient surveillance state. And it did scare people. A lot of people watched that film and were shocked. And so you've got to think, this film's only, 10 years, 11 years later, but being shown to a much younger audience. Being shown to the kids of the people who watched Enemy of the State, if you like. So, yeah, you've really got to wonder at the psychological impact of that. And the character, even the character himself, I can't remember the actor's name, but the Burke character, he is John Voight from Enemy of the State. He's the same
looks like him.
Looks like him, talks like him, gives orders like him. The whole, the whole thing is lifted from that. And I would say relatively obviously so. I think they're not just paying homage to the Witch Mountain films of the 70s or to UFO culture or all the other things. They are also paying quite distinct homage to that film. And why? Because that film's pretty messed up. And quite, like I say, just quite disturbing. But a couple of other things I just wanted to pick up on. The Rock is due to appear in a film this year called Central Intelligence, which is a probable CIA-assisted comedy. And it basically looks like a male version of Spy that came out last year with Melissa McCarthy. It's essentially that, but with male characters. I did want to bring up Witch Mountain in the film. Is it Cheyenne Mountain? Just like in, we talked about when we did 7 Days in May. You have that whole thing with Mount Thunder, Mount Weather.
Yes.
In this, I mean, I don't necessarily know which secret mountain-based government facility they're basing Witch Mountain on, but just like in, War Games, there's a lot of that in there. Again, they're putting some stuff in there that normally would have not that much space in a kids' movie. And just like War Games back in the 80s, I think that opened a few people's eyes. This one has that potential as well. Yeah. What do we make of that combination of themes? Well, it's certainly pretty disturbing. For a kids' movie, there is some stuff in here that I'm kind of surprised they got away with. But I suppose because it's not overtly sexual, there's no nudity or swearing or gory violence, you can get away with it. Which I suppose speaks to, the nature of our censorship and film classification and all of that. But just to shamelessly recycle our analysis of other films, of almost every film we've done in this series, Jack Bruno, The Rock, is the willing fool who is inducted into a secret world just as we, the watching audience, are inducted into that yet again. So...
Well, the kids keep telling him stop following us, and he just is like, okay, all right, and then he just keeps following them.
He keeps getting the warnings, so he is they're very much building that kind of occult philosophy into this story as well. So there's a lot of dark layers underneath what, like I say, it is a very fun movie that I did really enjoy, but it also disturbs me.
I think there's sort of there is a big mishmash of things. And this even in some ways kind of goes to what we were kind of hinting at in a little bit off mic, that it sort of now mainstream culture has eaten conspiracy culture and it's being regurgitated out in just this big mess of like, oh, Madonna has a song called Illuminati on her new album. It's just sort of out there everywhere as part of the big messy mix. And I found in sort of the same way as I went through 3 out of 4. I haven't wrapped it up yet. The Hunger Games films, how much of a mishmash of every sci-fi dystopian film I've ever seen was sort of put in there. So in here, in Race to Witch Mountain, at some point, the kids, I forget even exactly what they're trying to track down. They're trying to track down maybe some sort of communicator that tells them where the ship is, but it's hidden away and it's buried in these goopy, gross, pod-like things that look like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. You know what's this occurred to me when I first watched the movie, and this is obviously a theme that I doubt kids are going to pick up on, but and again, it's just sort of an interesting meme or something that's put in here again in a kids movie, is that this is all about an intelligence failure, because the movie is the bad guys in the movie are not concerned with the fact that they're about to be invaded by aliens. They're really concerned with dissecting them, which, of course, would just, that would mean that they wouldn't be able to stop the military faction from invading them. So that was just like a weird, I don't know if anyone else thought that, but I thought this movie was a great sort of idea of this is an intelligence failure. They're so concerned with killing the aliens that they're not really concerned with the fact that they're about to be invaded at any moment. By, this military faction that would probably enslave all of Earth or something like that. So again,
you mean that as a kind of metaphor for we dropped the ball on whatever event you want to talk about,
right? Yeah,
because we were too focused on this thing, so we just didn't see the bigger picture and blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, maybe like when Burke gets recalled to Washington, there's a secret committee that holds a hearing on him, and they would ask him, well, why weren't you concerned about the impending alien invasion? And it was an intelligence failure. We were looking the other way. If only we had more money, we would have been able to, gain the alien intelligence. So we wouldn't have tried to, dissect and torture these two aliens. But that aside, there is also quite a bit of hyperreality within this movie, and that's something that Tom and I we talked quite a bit about in the Homeland series that we recently did, and that's something that sort of happens in a lot of CIA assisted films, but particularly in UFO films, there is a melding of hyperreality that's sort of unprecedented. And again, this is all really described in great detail in Robbie Graham's book Silver Screen Saucers, but the director, Andy Fickman, wanted this movie to be, in his own words, as based in reality as possible. And he actually schooled the cast in UFO lore, in all sorts of ufology. He made them read, every book possible. He would sit down with them and they would watch different UFO documentaries. The film is sprinkled with really quite well-known UFO researchers. Whitley Strieber is probably the most recognizable.
He's the only one I recognized. Are there more?
William Burns is, I believe, is in the movie. I know he was a consultant on the movie. And then like at the UFO convention, like all those booths are real. So there is like the guy from like UFO magazine, like the editor. He's really there in the movie. There's a Fate magazine, which is like another ufology magazine. That's like real people from Fate magazine are there. But yeah, Whitley Strieber is the most well known, and he of course wrote the book Communion. Quickly, James, you actually spoken to Whitley Strieber, is that correct?
I would have to actually go back and look through when I worked for Clyde Lewis at Ground Zero. I was the producer of the show for about a year and a half. And I was booking all the guests and was doing a lot of the pre and post show work. I now kind of forget which guys I maybe talked to or met, but definitely, and that's actually what's fun about the film is a lot of the character names are hat tip names to well-known people. So there's now I'm missing them. Harlan, Friedman,
right?
Like Stanton Friedman and Harlan Ellison, even as a sci-fi writer. But so I talked to some of those dudes, but that's, I think, in some ways, that's what brought me here. But I found myself there when I worked at Ground Zero going, oh gosh, I don't actually have a huge background in a lot of ufology. But I think the thing that sort of shows, I end up realizing I do, because a lot of the research all kind of connects in a lot of ways. And we've all been doing this for a while.
Well, and again, on the sort of note of hyperreality, there is some direct involvement from, we believe it's a CIA agent, but definitely someone within the intelligence sphere with this movie. And this again comes from Robbie's book. We'll have some links up to some older articles from his old website before he changed it, which is Silver Screen Saucers, I think, .co.uk. But anyway, Robbie Graham actually spoke with Andy Fickman, the director. And according to Fickman, there was who he believed to be an active CIA agent that was advising him, and he was on set. He helped design the alien writing and symbols that's seen in the ship. He would advise him on certain things. He removed certain things from the script because of, quote, protocol and standpoint, that they didn't make sense, whatever the hell that is supposed to mean. And the most sort of amazing thing that Fickman says is that they actually went to NORAD, to Missile Command Center, and that this particular CIA or intelligence operative got Fickman and his team access to NORAD for 12 hours. They were even allowed to take hundreds of photos, 300 of which, according to Fickman, were then approved for them to somewhat copy for their sets for Witch Mountain. And Fickman said, quote, "Nothing happened at NORAD without him flashing his card and making his calls." Now, the CIA Office of Public Affairs media spokesman Paula Weiss, who was Robbie actually sent an email to her, and she said, quote, "We have no knowledge of any CIA officer having assisted with this film. It's very easy for outsiders, including Hollywood people, to assume any U.S. intel officer is CIA when in fact he could have been from DIA, NSA, NGA, etc. Sorry, I can't resolve this for you based on the available information." So this is sort of a first for us on this series, in that this is a pretty direct, this is like an supposedly active CIA agent involved in this movie. And again, he's involved in a UFO movie made by Disney that's ostensibly for children. So, I don't know. I mean, James, what was your take on this when we sent you the articles?
Well, I was going to say, the articles are the treasure trove in going through all of this, and to learn, and because lots of things I didn't know about. But again, you mentioned he worked on Cops. Was this the designer or the? Oh no, that was in the Alien Encounters. Alien Encounter. Okay, on that sort of weird documentary, Alien Encounters from New Tomorrowland, which we still find to this day movies with Tomorrowland, and there was even Escape Tomorrow. Then before Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, I enjoy the connection that they basically had a propaganda campaign in leading up to the movie because no one knew what Close Encounters meant. Right. And that there's a quote about it. It kind of sounds like a pornographic movie.
Yes, yeah.
Because no one had any reference to what that vocabulary meant at that time. So 18 months before Close Encounters, they basically start to do all kinds of stuff, and they do stuff at planetariums and da-da-da-da-da. So the seeds are all there kind of planted. I think a note on your hyperreality, and I don't think this is what I would have... it wasn't what I was thinking when I saw it, but there's an event when, the men in black are pursuing them and it busts up the UFO convention. And I'm not sure if that's also too when the sort of the hunters are like the alien hunter is coming after the kids.
Yes, I think that's that's the same. Yeah.
Okay, and that's classic, action movie stuff where you've got multiple people chasing multiple people. But there's an event where the ufology, the UFO convention, people are there watching a fake superhero or alien thing, and the real busts through, and it's one of those audience kind of thinks it's real stunts. That's sort of a subtle hat tip to, I think, sort of the meta of, kind of breaking through that wall, which they do then literally in there.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. That is so true. Again, they're like, this is the best convention ever.
That's right. That's like the laugh line.
Right, yeah, and this alien is getting like blown up on stage. Oh no, totally. I had totally missed that but that is perfect hyper reality moment.
Something we haven't mentioned at all, I think, is very important. It's Cheech Marin. No, I'm kidding. But that's the thing that, again, as being an adult watching the movie, I go, oh my God, it's Gary Marshall, Penny Marshall's dad, who actually shows up after what I thought was probably the most intense part of the film, and you get hit with lots of action and lots of heavy propaganda. And then Gary Marshall comes out and it's all funny, and you kind of go, oh, it kind of lets you, you get to
you get a moment of breathing.
Yeah. But what are my other notes? Then guys like Cheech Marin show up, people that you recognize. That again kind of makes it fun for an adult and makes the medicine go down.
Yeah, right. Tom, what was your take on the fact that there is this CIA agent or some intelligence? I mean, again, the CIA's own public affairs spokesperson is not denying that this person is an intelligence operative. He might just be from the Defense Intelligence Agency or the National Security Agency, or even more bizarre is the NGA, which rarely gets mentioned, but that's the National Geospatial Agency. So what is your take on these allegations that seem to, in kind of classic CIA they're sort of denied but sort of confirmed at the same time?
Well, this was the CIA's public affairs office, their entertainment liaison office. This is the way they operated under Chase Brandon. He was going around for years saying, oh, no, we were never involved in 24. No one from 24 has ever asked us for anything. And then suddenly it's turned around, no, yeah, we've been involved in 24. Yeah, we were consulting on that. And he played this game with a number of productions where he sort of denied and then admitted, or the other way round sometimes as well. I think they want to keep us guessing as to what they're actually up to in the entertainment industry, even in terms of the basic information. What films and TV shows have you worked on and not worked on? We also have the possibility, we could turn that email around and say, just as it's easy for anyone in the US intelligence community to pretend that they're CIA, it's easy for the CIA to deny that someone is one of their operatives by saying, oh no, they were probably working for someone else. They're probably, FBI or DIA or, because there's like 30 of them or something. You can always come up with someone else that you can suggest that this person worked for. So it's highly likely he did actually work for the CIA. And I'd also like to point out, in that CIA Inspector General's report on their involvement in the entertainment industry, they openly admitted that in that period, the period that this film was made, and that was studied in this report, that they had currently serving CIA agents undercover, presumably in disguise in some instances, meeting away from Langley with people from the entertainment world, from, Hollywood and what have you, without anyone from the public affairs office being present. So you've got to wonder, is there a way for people from Hollywood to bypass the whole public affairs mechanism and get some kind of support from deeper within the CIA that doesn't go through the formal process? Because that's what we seem to be looking at here, and that is what that Inspector General's report admits and says quite openly. That's what was going on in this period. So it all adds up. It's all quite plausible that this guy was CIA and that they're just playing some sort of half-assed cover-up game. On the subject of hyperreality, one question that occurs to me, and I'll fire this at you, James, because I'm sure you've seen this film, Super 8, which came out around the same time, the J.J. Abrams film.
And I actually saw that in the theater.
Okay. And J.J. Abrams, another guy who's worked with the CIA and DOD pretty much for his entire career. And yet that film, in some ways, is more of a fantasy than Race to Witch Mountain is. even though it's trying quite hard to be the opposite, I would say. But do you agree with that assessment? I mean, which of these two films did you actually find the more realistic?
Well, it's Super 8 seems more realistic, and I'll tell you actually why we went to go see it in the theater. They actually shot the film in my home state of West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Which doesn't get that much action, so anytime...
Or not good action.
No good action, so as a good state, it's like, hey, they shot it in West Virginia. And then, of course, you go see the movie, and they set it in Ohio, because that's just more middle America, and it doesn't come with the baggage of saying West Virginia. But that was honestly, I think, probably what leaned us towards going to see that film at the time. And I haven't thought about it all that much, but when I think of, it's Super 8 by its name, it hinges on this gritty footage from a Super 8 camera. So it, again, has that very real, gritty kind of feel to it, whereas this film feels much more futuristic and, computers in your pockets in a way. But yeah, I hadn't thought to connect those two films, and I actually should probably do more research because I didn't know that J.J. Abrams had tons of DoD connections, and he's making the new Star Wars movies now.
Yes, among other things, but yes, yeah, very much so. Well, just for example, he worked on Mission Impossible 3. He's now dominating the Mission Impossible franchise. Him and Tom Cruise are basically producing that together with, it seems, CIA assistance. Certainly the third one was Chase Brandon CIA production, but. Okay, so you think Super 8 is a more realistic movie, but like you say, that does largely hinge on things like the setting and the nature of this story about them, like accidentally filming this massive crash involving this alien monster.
And you never actually see any, you hardly ever see any kind of monster. It's more of it has that feel of kind of a throwback, almost 70s kind of horror film in some ways, which again doesn't strike me, Super 8. I don't remember exactly maybe how intense or violent it may be, but all the stars are little kids, but is it a kids movie?
I'm just saying it's interesting that the reasons why it is that you're saying that it's more realistic. And I agree with you. I'm not sort of disputing what you're saying about it. I just, Pierce, have you seen that one? Have you seen Super 8? Or
No, I have actually not seen Super 8. I know some of the stuff about it from reading Robbie's book, but I have not seen Super 8. I would like to see it though, because I do kind of like J.J. Abrams. I think he, to get completely off topic, I think he did a really great job with the new Star Wars movie.
Well, okay, fair enough, but
that's not necessarily off topic.
No.
Not at all. Since it is, set in space, and half of the characters, if not all of them, are aliens. But have you seen Cloverfield, another J.J. Abrams one, which is similar kind of thing, but a much more adult version of the same sort of story? I guess
I have not seen Cloverfield either.
James, have you?
You've not seen Cloverfield? No, I know about it, but I remember at the time. It seemed like most of the commentary was, "Oh, it makes me sick because it's all handheld and jittery."
Well, I bring it up just because it has that same, curious blend of it's all shot, or most of it's shot on handheld camcorders, but it's portraying this massive, alien monster going crazy in New York. So certainly around that period, we had thrust of some sort in Hollywood. Mostly, it seems, actually, to be honest, based around J.J. Abrams movies, where they're presenting this topic in a way that it probably hadn't really been touched on for a while. If you look at something like Transformers, okay, they're extraterrestrial robots, but the whole thing's utterly ridiculous. No one would take Transformers seriously, whereas adults might be slightly more prone to taking something like Super 8 or Cloverfield seriously, and children are certainly going to take this film more seriously than Transformers. Is that a fair assessment? Well, yeah, okay, that's a question. Yeah. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, in some ways, something like Cloverfield is still probably just sort of a disaster film. So whether it's a big monster or an earthquake or something, I think as an adult, it plays on all those adult fears of, shit, what would I do if some disaster hits? How will I take care of my kids or my family? And you're kind of thinking about all of that element to it. But maybe, I don't know. I don't know what to, like, a kid watching Race to Witch Mountain in 2009, let alone 2016. Now, could this have, it timed out around the same time as we also had a very savior-like president who was depicted as being, beamed down from another planet in some ways. We had Obama coming in, and there was this, albeit phony positivity, and, there was lots of, Obama as a superhero.
Isn't Obama in? Am I making that up? Is he in the credits in the beginning? Is there a moment with him? No.
Because there's this big montage of...
I know Dennis Kucinich, Reagan, Clinton. I could have sworn that there was... Or a voiceover of Obama. Because he's talked about, Area 51 or something.
Well, and there was that clip in the new X-Files that they use of Obama.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
Oh, right, where he's on the chat show and the guy's saying, the first thing I'd do if I was president was go straight to the, where are the Area 51 files? I want to know the truth about aliens.
And that's one of the last notes I actually have here. It's Hillary disclosure. She went on that same show with Jimmy Kimmel just the other day. And he asked her, like he asked Obama and like he asked Bill Clinton, I want to know about alien stuff. So I played the clip on my show this morning. So I think it was just a couple of nights ago at most that she was on there and talking about, when I get in there, I'm going to look again. And, it's not UFOs anymore. It's, unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Right. Whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean.
But it's a part of, we see, like, I don't know. When the phony Democrats are in, we find out more about aliens. That seems like basically what goes down. So just as there was that push when Bill Clinton came in, whether it was the JFK Records Act, and that was a lot, that came out of that film that spurred on, hey, we need to get a lot of these records released.
Oh, I mean, the rumor is that Jimmy Carter, I think, with something like he had a personal screening of Close Encounters, but there was something. Basically, there was some secret meeting between Spielberg, allegedly between Spielberg and Jimmy Carter, and his advisors freaked out because Carter had already said a bunch of crazy things about UFOs, and they were like, "If this comes out, that's it, we're done. Like you can't talk to Spielberg, you can't, nothing like this." Again, because and again, I was just thinking Democrat, but Jimmy Carter was and again, Dennis Kucinich claimed to have actually seen a UFO. I think at his aunt's house. And I wish I remembered it, but his aunt is some famous Hollywood celebrity, or his godmother. But anyway, on all of that, I think we have to talk about the conspiracy culture itself, because this movie is very much, I would say maybe more so than any other film that we've done in both seasons of this. This is really tapping directly into conspiracy culture. In that, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy culture, real figures in the movie, but also obviously UFOs is probably the kind of, it is the godfather of the alt media and conspiracy culture and all of the things that we talk about. It all does, sort of go back to 1947, to Roswell, to aliens and things. And there is this really sharp divide within the movement between, I guess, what we would call believers and non-believers. And this is a very contentious issue. And there are a lot of people that are unwilling to cover UFOs at all. And I would say, I mean, I've never really covered UFOs. Tom, I don't believe you've ever done it before. James, you were just saying you're not really, like a UFO expert or anything. But I guess, why is this such a contentious issue? Is this really by design? Because obviously anyone that's taken, a little bit of time to look into this, that the CIA and the Pentagon have made it one of their platforms is to infiltrate these movements, to kind of either get into their good graces and shift them in certain directions. I mean, we were just talking about the Air Force going to people like Ward Kimball at Disney and saying, hey, yeah, produce a documentary. We'll give you footage. We'll help you do it, And that's not the only time. There's a very famous UFO documentary called UFOs, Past, Present, and Future that was made in 1972 it was a CBS documentary. And Robert Eminger and producer Alan Sandler were encouraged by the U.S. Air Force to make the movie. Eminger actually believed that Sandler worked for the CIA. They were promised, again, real footage of UFO landings. They were granted access to the Pentagon, NASA, military officials. They received info in what was described to them as a CIA clean room. So this has sort of always been a factor. Of course, the NICAP, which is the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. That's a very famous UFO investigative group. It was established in the 1950s with Donald Kehoe, who's very famous in the ufology community. He was on their board of governors, and it's the first CIA director, Roscoe Hillenkotter, would later join NICAP as a governor, and he basically helped to oust Kehoe. Along with Joseph Bryan, who was also became part of NICAP, and Joseph Bryan was a former chief CIA psychological warfare. And that's not it. Obviously, some people might be familiar with people like Richard Doty, who was a U.S. Air Force intelligence officer. He went all around the UFO community giving fake information, pushing people in certain directions. Doty was in a very famous 2-hour TV special called UFO Cover Up back in the late 80s. There's William Moore, who is no longer big in the UFO community because he was actively working with the CIA, and he knew it too. And he said, well, it was okay because they were giving me some real information along with fake information. But anyway, to kind of wrap that up, there's a lot of this. But James, what is your take on this? Is this why this has become such a contentious issue? Because I know that many times when people start talking about UFOs, and I'm guilty of this as well, my immediate reaction is, oh, this is this is some sort of government plant, or this is what they want us to be talking about. And is this by design? And is this why so many people are unwilling to cover UFOs?
Probably. It's such a minefield.
Yeah.
That probably a lot of I don't know. I guess for myself, just like I said, it's never been something I've been heavy into. So in some ways, it's easy to it's not something I would cover day to day in my own kind of work. I guess. And it works both ways, and that's what's funny. That's the story this movie tells us, because at the very end, they're successful authors, and they're telling they become disclosure authors, and they become very rich. And I guess does the film ever say, like, is it it's supposed to be present day? Then when they're famous, I guess it has a sheen of slightly several years into the future. It seems even a little slicker.
Yeah.
But so the story is, you can get rich by talking about this stuff if you do it right, because there's a big market for it. And I think it's sort of, I don't know, maybe it's win-win for, like we see in the film. It's a win for the powers that shouldn't be to get their words out. And the people who then just sort of, I want to make movies and do stuff, they get success out of it as well. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's why, X-Files is so huge. Coast to Coast has returned.
Right.
Like, conspiracy sells now, because it's a part of the mix of everything. But it goes, I mean, I guess you're right. It does have to go back to the original kind of 47 event, which then is the same time the National Security Act is being passed and the creation of the CIA and the NSA and all of that. So it becomes difficult to separate one from the other. And I think that's maybe what probably, again, kind of makes it a minefield, because it's like, I have no way of knowing the reality of it and what's a bunch of bunk. I know it seems foolish to think there isn't something else floating around out in all the universes, but I haven't personally seen anything super compelling yet. And I think that's always been my question. I always wanted, back in the I did college radio, but I also did theater. I was doing soundtracks for plays. It's always like editing and making, musical montages and things. That was the most fun I had working with Clyde. Was if you listen to Ground Zero, the musical montages that happen throughout the show are so much fun. I'm trailing off. What was my point?
Well, I suppose, the question is, for me, the difference between how this was way back when this subject was something that was quite contentious, and that most people, right, regardless of the conspiracy culture itself, most people would kind of see as a bit wacky and a bit like, you've probably been drinking the homebrew a bit too much, and that's why you saw lights in the sky. And okay, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who did drink too much homebrew and saw some lights in the sky. But these days, it's become far, far more normalized, not just in the conspiracy culture, but in the mainstream culture. And I don't think that is just a result of mainstream eating conspiracy culture. I think that's also a function of, like, as political apathy and political frustrations and the sort of the feeling that we can't seem to solve these sorts of problems, as those things have piled up, for any kind of curious person who's actually looking at the world and thinking about things and reflecting, whether they are a conspiracy theorist or otherwise, it's a nice escape. It's a nice thing to think about. And so it has got a lot bigger. And again, not just because of mainstream eating conspiracy, not just because of the rise of the internet, not just because of the rise of the alternative media and things like that, but actually because at heart, it's quite a nice topic. It's quite a nice thing to idly wonder about. And it's relatively safe and doesn't, it's not like looking at what's going on as the result of wars or terrorism, or those kinds of topics can become very depressing. Whereas I don't think the UFO topic is ever all that depressing.
Or as divisive. I guess, yeah, kind of what you're getting at of arguing over social issues or politics. Everybody alive on the planet would look up at night and stare and wonder what else is out there.
Well, since the dawn of time, since the dawn of human civilization, we've stared at the sky and attributed various things to it. We used to think the planet Mars was a god. Stuff like that. I mean, this is, I guess, one of the most fundamental human activities in its way. And all that UFO culture is, really, is just the modern manifestation of that. It is a new religion in that respect.
There you go. Because I was going to say, because way back in the day, they drank too much of the homebrew and looked up at the stars and made up a bunch of stories.
Well, I guess is it really any different now? I mean, because one of the questions that strikes me is that, for example, I'm not a big, well, I don't really find the whole like chemtrails thing all that plausible, and yet in the alt media, there are some people who would very, very happily cover that topic and believe it's completely plausible, but would totally shy away from the UFO topic and say, oh, no, that's disinformation or whatever. And so the line of plausibility for the unknown, for the staring at the sky and trying to figure out what the hell's going on up there and what it means for us down here, the line of so where we draw, this is what we consider a plausible explanation and this is what we don't, is very subjective. Because I know, James, maybe you disagree with me and you think that chemtrails are more plausible than UFOs or whatever. I'm not really trying to make an argument about that. I'm just saying, when it comes to the unknown, the way we frame that is very varied. And I think that's not something that the conspiracy culture has done all that well at accommodating and coming to terms with. Perhaps you disagree with me. I'm just sort of throwing this out there.
No, that's very well put. I did the thing I was going to say earlier and got derailed. I was thinking about War of the Worlds.
Okay.
And I always wanted to do something in my theater background, if you could kind of pull off a sort of War of the Worlds event in a theater and trick people into thinking something had happened.
Yeah.
And in the middle of sort of thinking about all that, cell phones and texting, I was like, oh, this is never going to happen. You won't pull that off. But my main question has always remained, and as the tech got bigger and more pervasive, I've always wondered, well, no, people wouldn't fall for a big fake thing. We're becoming that much more, media savvy. And now I see actually 10 years later and look around, oh no, we'll totally fall for it. People haven't gotten more media savvy and seem to have lost a lot of discernment on a lot of levels. So, they could easily pull off a War of the Worlds event. You got Hillary on the TV talking about, we want to tell you about aliens.
Yeah.
So that becomes, again, that difficult thing where even if someone landed, would we all think it's just fake?
Oh, well, that's at the end of Robbie Graham's book, that's his whole thing, is that disclosure will both happen and not, whenever, if it were to happen, it would both simultaneously be real and unreal at the same time. Because no matter what, it's the melding between the two, in terms of UFOs and reality, however they are, is so close that even if the aliens were coming out and talking to you, no, that's not real. And then, the other half of people, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, duh. I knew this was going to happen. Cause I read the Majestic 12 documents, so I knew. But Tom, go ahead.
There you go. Exactly. That the point is this, regardless of which alien arrival it is, which messianic arrival from the heavens it is, whether it's a peaceful, they land on the White House lawn and say, take us to your leader, no, not him, he's not your real leader. Or if it's the invasion and, New York blows up and, as per always in movies, the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge gets blown up. Even if it's that version of events, it will be broadly the same thing, that you will have a certain number of people who will refuse to believe it no matter what. You'll have a certain number of people who will believe it's authentic no matter what. And I guess you'll have a fair number of people like us sort of sat in the middle going, well, we're not really all that sure, and we're not sure it's that wise to jump to conclusions yet. So I suppose that's the point that we're getting at, that this whole dialogue has been shaped into a very, very divisive issue in which people have very, very dogmatic opinions, regardless of what those opinions are. And that's the question we're asking, is this something that's been done deliberately? And if so, why? And just one thing that I wanted to bring up, because it's kind of tangentially, not even that tangentially relevant. The show, The Conspiracy Road Trip, which was produced by the BBC. Now, I was invited to be on that show for their 7/7 episode, and I obviously refused because I knew it would be a crock of shit. But they did, I think, 3 episodes. There was one, I can't even remember what the first one was on. There was one on 7/7, and there was one on Area 51 and UFOs. And they actually took them out to Area 51 and, ran around the fences and filmed out in the desert and had some fun. And it was that one where they were kind of affirming the Conspiracy Road Trip participants' beliefs. They were saying, it's okay to believe in aliens and UFOs. Come on, everyone believes in that. So no, you're not allowed to believe in state terrorism. That's completely mocked. That's not something that, this show was ever even going to really endorse for a moment. But UFOs, oh no, that's okay. And you've got to think, a show like that, it's primarily being watched by conspiracy theorists. It's not being watched by people who want to debunk conspiracy theorists, because they just won't watch it. They just won't bother. It's being watched by people like us. That's who watched that show. And so, there again, we have the establishment, the BBC, endorsing this as this is the conspiracy theory you're allowed to believe in. But it's one that is, like we say, so divisive. So I suppose that's what we're getting at. Is that what they're doing here? Because it's a distinct possibility. I don't want to stick my neck out and say I think that is exactly what's going on, but I certainly understand why people suspect that this is something that is now being encouraged and normalized precisely to take the wind out of, to take the edge off, to take the dangerousness out of conspiracy theories, because it's ultimately a pretty harmless conspiracy theory, particularly if nothing happens. If there is no alien disclosure and nothing lands on the White House lawn, then it's just an open-ended question that we never get an answer to. And what better way to nullify a culture than to get it caught up in questions like that? So, yeah, that's the question we're left with, and I suppose... What's your opinion on it? Either of you. Jump in and interrupt me.
Well, I was going to say what you were just saying there in terms of, this is what we want you to believe. It's okay. Because again, if you ask anybody, is there life out there in the universe? I mean, I would say, 98% of people are going to say, of course, there has to be. But if you talk about UFOs, you're a nut job. Even though, Stephen Hawking's and Michio Kaku and all the these sort of super smart scientists, and they're all atheists and blah blah blah. They all believe in aliens for sure, and they to the point where they're like, of course there are. But what you were saying though, with that in terms of the conspiracy culture, I think what's also really interesting is that there's more real declassified documents about UFOs than anything else. And again, we're talking about. I think it would be too big a conspiracy where you have not only the U.S. government, but British, French, Argentinian, Brazilian, Russian. I mean, basically every country that has enough money to investigate UFOs does do it, and they all come up with there's something out there. Some of it is, yes, they're spy satellites or, other governments testing things, but there's a whole lot of stuff we have no idea about. So it's interesting in that it is the conspiracy theory that you're allowed to get into, even though it's mocked. And at the same time, in many ways, it's the most documented in that you've got a ton of Blue Book and, there's lots of Tom, you would know the CIA's, report on, UFOs. I forget the commission.
You're thinking of things like the Robertson panel and all that.
Robertson panel, but also Project Blue Book. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, just recently the British government declassified like thousands of pages of UFO stuff. So again, I wonder. I don't know. Maybe I'm the odd man out here, and I really, if you haven't already noticed out there, listeners, I really like Robbie Graham's book, and it did make me kind of question a lot of stuff within the UFO community. But I have to say, I think as much as it is obviously a group that has been infiltrated, controlled, circumvented, whatever, why? You know, there's that element of, well, why are they doing this? And again, I think is what you were saying before, James, with the 1947, a very momentous year in terms of all sorts of national security, CIA, all sorts of things. But again, why is it that they decided to completely control this entire movement? And is there any truth to this? Because again, I mean, if you're saying that this is all a joke, this is all a government plot to control the alternative media, you're talking about like every major country on the planet is all doing this together in tandem because they want, you know, like coast to coast to control the world. So I don't know, James, if you anything you want to say on that?
Well, I couldn't answer that. I mean, we're basically left with more questions than answers, which might get to the heart of a lot of this, and whoever coined the saying about if they can get you to ask the wrong questions, it doesn't matter what the answers are. That was the thing I kind of realized back doing, you know, research years back, and it's all research is important, but realizing, there's this whole world of, well, we can argue about the ballistics of JFK till the cows come home, but all that shit's gone, and we're never going to know. And it's those sorts of things that sort of, hey, as long as you guys can keep it in the speculative realm as long as you want, but it keeps it away from the reality. I think the other unanswered or unanswerable question about all this is the Robbie Graham articles and stuff make it seem like the most important part was getting these drawings and these images in the film. And that's one of my kind of lingering leftover questions. Is on top of all of the, you know, sort of the social overlay and all the things we've talked about, whether it's sort of the, you know, the technology, the enemy of the state track and control grid. Why did they want these drawings?
Right.
Why were they that important? And are they really?
Oh, absolutely. Again, that's what's so wild is that it seems like if this is all true, then, I mean, the CIA is paying some guy to go to the set of a movie so that they get the right alien drawings. I mean, that's the CIA doesn't do, again, any intelligence agency, they don't do things just to do them. You know, they're not just doing this to fuck with the alt media. They're not going to waste this much time and effort. I mean, they might do it for certain things, obviously, but this is at this point, you're talking about a very large scale operation all around aliens. I mean, why even spend the time? Why, you know, maybe I can see it for other things, maybe like the X-Files or, you know, there are definitely other, like Close Encounters, very influential in the ufology community, all those sort of things. But Race to Witch Mountain? I mean, how many ufologists were even going to, you know, see the movie? That's obvious. I guess it's not for them, but it just sort of begs the question of why become so involved in a children's movie? And I think it's sort of... It makes me, again, I don't know, wonder what is it with this whole UFO thing? Why that even today, figuring they must have a lot of control over this, they're still manipulating it. So I think that answers more questions, you know, or asks more questions and poses more questions than answers. I don't know, Tom, anything on that?
Well, simply that, I mean, it makes sense just from a sort of infiltration and disinformation point of view, but I think that's far too simplistic. I think, if anything, the reason, to my mind, would be to acclimatize people to the notion of government secrecy, and government secrecy around something that would be, if it is true, desperately important. It would be not necessarily game-changing, but, you know, people would be quite surprised. It would be quite a massive scientific discovery if we made contact with, you know, aliens. But aside from the question of aliens itself, it's the whole dynamic, I think, that they're trying to acclimatize people to, where it's the notion that the government keeps secrets. There's not an awful lot you can do about it unless, you're the Rock and you're an extraterrestrial and you've got superpowers and that kind of thing. And ultimately just to sort of leave people with that state of not necessarily apathy, but a sense of inevitability about the secrecy, that there isn't much you can do to challenge the government part of that all you can just do is hope for some kind of, like I say, a messianic arrival that just comes in and blows all that out of the water. And that actually struggling against the government secrecy itself is futile. Yeah, that's it, I suppose. A sense of futility about government secrecy would be the reason to promote this, that I can see. I could be wrong. Really, and it's quite late here, so I might well be.
Right. All right. Well, I guess on that note, we'll start to wrap it up here. But I think we should. I guess one quick thing. It's just of note in terms of who is influencing this movie. There's a special thanks at the end of the movie to the Aerospace Corporation, which is a federally funded research and development center out in California that was set up by the Air Force and the Department of Defense. It's technically a nonprofit, and they work on everything from ICBMs to drone technologies, and they also assisted the Air Force in the creation of GPS. I have no idea why they were involved in this movie or for what purpose. But again, very interesting. And I guess we just wanted to also say that we should give the UFO crowd their due. The three of us were talking before we started recording, and we were talking about the sort of racist, horrible, right-wing nut jobs who hate women that are all over the alt media right now. And you have to say the UFO crowd is a pretty open and friendly group of people. There's no real big racist assholes, maybe with the exception of like David Icke. And we should also kind of give them the respect as the original truthers, and trailblazers in alt media and whatnot. But, and I will also say again, Robbie Graham's book is really also a film studies book. It's not just, about UFOs, but I thought we should, end on the subject of UFOs and, a question. Are we believers? And I will say for myself that I was firmly in the camp that obviously there are aliens out there, but I never really thought much about ufology. And I have to say, until I read Robbie Graham's book, and it did make me wonder a little bit. But I don't know, James, are you a believer?
I think probably, like I said earlier, I don't discount it at all. I don't know. I guess in some ways maybe I don't think about it all that much. And when I do think about it, again, it would be, oh, well, of course there's something else out there. Now, those thoughts put into my head from decades of films and programming.
Exactly, yeah.
Is it just the natural, well, I realize myself and my small part in this little small bit of nature, and I see how these systems all kind of work. So it's, I don't know, it seems logical to extrapolate out and think, well, there's probably other beams and things floating around and circling around us because I'm circling around something else. And I don't know. I honestly, I mean, yes, they are probably aliens, but will they take any kind of form we've ever seen? I don't know. And we might not ever see that.
Tom, believer, non-believer?
Well, like you, I mean, if you'd asked me 12 months ago, I would have said it's not really a topic I have any opinion on or even care all that much about. But having read Robbie Graham's book, having looked at this film and, the recent X-Files and the response to that, and just thinking about this topic more and finding myself thinking about it more, I have to admit I find it a lot more plausible than I did then. I suppose it depends on what's the question? How are we framing the question here? Are we saying that UFOs are necessarily extraterrestrial? Because there is, of course, the explanation that this is all super military aircraft or whatever. But there is also the idea that these are some kind of species living in the upper atmosphere. That these strange flying lights in the sky or whatever it is that people keep seeing are actually organic and not exactly extraterrestrial, but not exactly terrestrial at the same time. And of course, just like species at the bottom of the oceans look pretty strange to us.
Right.
I mean, we dwell on the land. We're used to, hedgehogs and sparrows and crocodiles and whatever. Although all of those probably look quite odd to an octopus. But you know what I'm saying. There are very strange creatures down on the bottom of the ocean. Is it possible there are very strange creatures living on the edges of our atmosphere? And that's actually what we're seeing? I know that's been raised as a hypothesis, and I've got to say, that strikes me as quite plausible and quite possible. And like James, I ultimately don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess we could probably do 20 more podcasts on this and not get down to the answer to that. But I think we'll leave it there. And I just want to say, James Evan Pilato, thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Absolutely, my pleasure. You guys are doing the kind of work I wish I was doing more in Media Monarchy.
Excellent.
So that was our discussion with James Evan Pilato on Race to Witch Mountain. And if you enjoyed that, then stick with us, because next week we've got another excellent episode coming up with another great guest. Robbie Martin of Media Roots will be talking with us about Zero Dark 30, and that's a conversation you do not want to miss. So as always, thanks for listening, and tune in again soon for another episode of the CIA in Hollywood.